Confidence and control. They may not be two words you associate with your personal finances. If you are like most Americans, your money situation is more likely a source of stress and confusion. Well, Foster and Motley's Joe Patterson shares some basic yet powerful tips to help ease that stress and clear up that confusion. I'm Patrice Sikora. Hey, Joe, good to have you back.
Thanks, Patrice. Happy to be here.
All right. So, Joe, why are we talking about this?
Well, ever feel overwhelmed by your finances? I think many folks might say yes to that question. In fact, in a recent survey, 65% of Americans said finances are their biggest source of stress.
Hmm.
And nearly 90% of people feel some level of financial stress. So if you said no to that, chances are you're
You're
not being
lying.
honest with
You're just
yourself,
lying.
right?
You're lying. You're lying.
Yeah, just straight up lying. So whether you're trying to just get a head start, get back on track, um, today's episode hopefully will help you head down the path of taking better control of your personal finances. So, we will start by acknowledging that there is way too much to cover here, whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's an hour. It's not enough time to cover all this, but we have to start somewhere. So the goal today is let's focus on how we can take inventory, how we can prioritize our goals, our needs, and how we can mitigate risk, right? So take baby steps in the right direction to improving your finances and understanding your finances.
All right, inventory, you mentioned that first.
Yeah.
It's difficult though because many people have a little bit over here, a little bit over there, and how do you get it all together?
Yeah. So this is a key point, and it's a good starting place because you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So let's think about what a basic inventory might look like. So again, this is a starting point. Like anything we talk about here, you can go way down the rabbit hole. There's lots of resources. There's probably too many resources, but let's start. And you can do this the old-fashioned way with pen and paper. We'll talk about some tools that might be helpful that are on the computer, on your phone, online. But what's a framework? So income, right? List your sources of income. For most people, that might be a salary, interest, and dividends from investments. If you have rental properties, if you're doing contract work, all that is lumped in under income. If you're retired, it might include a pension or Social Security. So those are the big ones. Expenses, right? So there's two types of expenses at a high level. There's fixed expenses and there's variable. Your fixed expenses are often the biggies, mortgage or rent, property taxes if you own a property, utilities, insurance, other debt payments, on loans, car loans, student loans, education, if you're paying for education for yourself or kids. And then variable expenses, which, in some ways are fixed, right? Because groceries is a variable expense. It's a necessity in many ways. It's a fixed expense, but it does vary. And then you get into the other categories like entertainment, dining out, travel, the fun stuff.
Mm.
House up. I say house updates, but this is, for homeowners, they'll know this is often unplanned, right? HVAC breaks, need a new water heater,
Been there,
painting.
done that. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
We'll nicely call them updates, but sometimes they're not always optional. They're not always the fun stuff like remodeling a kitchen. So we talked about expenses against income, but let's talk about the other side of the equation, which is what are the things you own, your assets, and what are the things you owe, your liabilities. So stuff you own, stuff you owe. And assets are your investments, savings accounts, retirement accounts. That includes your employer plans if you have a 401k or a 403b. Property you own, if you own a home, if you own land, other real estate, rental real estate, and other valuables, vehicles, jewelry, collections, coins, artwork, anything would fall under that category. It's an asset, right? We're talking about things you could sell for material dollars. And, with respect to artwork and jewelry, it's probably things you'd list on your separate schedules for your homeowner's insurance, right? Things that, we're not talking about the $50 print I picked up at the art fair, but something that you'd want to insure and has value and that you could sell if you wanted to. Liabilities, right? Liabilities offset assets. So we're talking about mortgages, student loans, credit cards, other car loans, things where you've taken out some sort of loan and you owe a payment, either a short-term payment like a credit card bill or long-term payment like mortgage, student, home equity loans, car loans. Um, so that's at the high level. That's the things we want you to track. How do we do it, right? You can get as basic as a pen and paper, right? You can hit next level on good old Excel, right? That's a decent way to track things. And now pretty much everything that's Microsoft based is web based. So you can probably feel comfort that your Excel file's backed up in the cloud somewhere. And then beyond that, there's a plethora of budgeting apps. And, I'm not endorsing one over the other, but there's many good choices out in the world. Like all of these tools, the one you use consistently is probably the best one. So if you're going to use that pen and paper consistently, hey, have at it. If you're going to use a budgeting app, Mint, Personal Capital, Good Budget, Every Dollar, Pocket Guard, there's many to choose from. Those are all, again, the one you use is the one that's probably the best
Okay.
in your personal situation.
You get comfortable with it, you know how to manipulate it.
Exactly. So, when we're thinking about inventory, the more precise, the better, right? But as I remind myself many times, don't let great get in the way of good, right? So, a good inventory is better than not having one at all, right? Um, and this is a process, so any good inventory is not a one-time exercise. It's a periodic exercise. The front end is often the big push, right? Because if you have nothing, getting from nothing to something takes work. But that's okay because this is something you update over time. And with any good inventory, periodic updates give you context, right? You can track how you're doing over time. This might be where some argument goes toward using an app, because if you're using many of these budgeting apps, they will often give you the functionality to link up your financial accounts.
Hmm.
So that's good, right? Because then you're not having to go in and manually key in each account value. Just keep in mind that most of these apps, especially the free ones, and most of them are free, they have in mind that they might want to sell you something, right? So they might say, oh, well, your bank account at US Bank isn't earning much interest. You could switch it to one of our savings accounts. And maybe that's a good thing, but just something to be aware of and keep your eyes open when you're heading into those types of situations.
So
Um,
you've got the basics that you've put down, and you're talking about you go back and take another look and update and fine tune. This may also be the opportunity for you to sit back and say, "Oh, I forgot about this one," be it an asset or be it a liability.
exactly. And some common ones there are, hey, I got an old 401k from a previous employer that's just kind of hanging out there. Um, I could probably roll that to an IRA or roll it to my new 401k. So it gives you the opportunity to, again, take inventory, maybe simplify, to your point, Patrice, because you probably don't need all those old accounts floating around out there. Maybe you opened a savings account one time because you got some sort of one-time bonus to open it online, but the money's just kind of hanging out there, not doing anything. I will say, working with lots of folks over time, there's value in simplicity and there's value in not having accounts scattered about among a bunch of different banks or custodians. So keep that in mind. And the more simple, the easier it is to track.
All right. Talk to me about goals. You've got your basics out here, and now you got to look at some goals to, I guess, prioritize.
Yeah. So let's again acknowledge that not all goals are equally important. Um, but thinking about prioritizing, let's consider a framework of, okay, there's needs and wants, right? Just a real basic, housing, food, healthcare, education. Those generally come first. Probably should come first.
Mhm.
Versus, hey, I want to move to a bigger home. You could argue that's a need for some more than others. Growing family, outgrowing your house, a new house would be really great for the family. More of a need than a want. Taking a reach goal trip. as a as
Hmm.
an individual or a couple or family. That's definitely a want, but again, that can be a goal. So then we kind of also think about needs versus wants in addition to short and long term, right? So good examples of short term goals. You gotta pay your expenses, right? That's probably the most critical short term goal. Um, Pay off higher interest debt to the extent you have any. Create an emergency fund, for challenging times, right? When you're dealing with unexpected job loss.
Or the hot water heater goes.
Hot water heater goes, that's more expensive. Anything that breaks now, yeah, we're talking probably thousands on hundreds of dollars, right? In the scope of
Mhm.
owning a home. So having cash set aside for unexpected stuff is very helpful and important. Longer term goals, some key examples there: retirement savings, uh, buying a home or upgrading a home, saving for education goals for yourself or your significant other or your kids, bigger home improvements. The kitchen project that we referenced is a biggie, and of course, we're after several years of inflation and shortages in construction labor markets, everything costs more than it did, 2, 3, 5, 7 years ago in that world. So um, all those would be good examples of goals that you might prioritize over a medium to longer term time frame.
Well, Joe, how about setting a small reward or a treat for yourself once you've reached a goal?
Yeah, that's a great behavioral tactic, Therese. So and when you think about that, think about, are you someone who responds positively to deadlines? Do you respond positively to carrots, as Patrice mentioned here? Because you know those can help you get to the same place quicker, right? So maybe you say, hey, we're saving for a less a less fun goal. We're going to do some work on the house, but we're gonna also bundle in a fun trip along with it, right? So it's not just the brutal push forward to set aside enough money to be able to get this work done or get that down payment scraped together for the new house. We're also gonna make sure we do something fun along the way.
Even a nice dinner.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
could be a night out,
yeah.
could be a weekend somewhere, something fun that doesn't derail your goals, obviously, but also gives you some incentive rather than just saving for the one thing and only the one thing. And one note on prioritizing, you know, it helps to prioritize for many folks to reduce the overwhelm because we just listed a bunch of potential goals, short, long term need goals, want goals. Um, your list could be long. That's where saying, okay, well, what are the things that are really most critical to me, to us, to our family, if that's the case, identifying what those are and then creating a plan to focus on those first is
Mhm.
helpful, because otherwise you're attacking 15 different goals at once, and that generally doesn't work great.
Talk to me about risks too. You really have to look at these.
Right, because we talked about all these kind of nice things. Let's save, let's identify goals. um, those are forward looking, and in most cases they're kind of aspirational in nature. um, but stuff happens, right? And one part of taking this initial step toward financial security and financial awareness is acknowledging that things happen that are unexpected,
Mhm.
and then taking some steps to control them. So some common financial risks might be job loss. That's a big one. Illness, death or disability of a family member, of a provider. Economic downturns, right? Job
True.
that directly affects jobs in our country, and if we have a tough economic situation, which we've been through many as a country, then jobs are lost, and people are affected, very very directly from job loss of one or both family members who are providers. So um, how can we mitigate risk, right? We can't eliminate risk, but we can mitigate it. um, the emergency fund is a nice one because that's a safety net against job loss or unexpected economic challenges. um, and job loss might not be job loss directly, it might be just reduce income if you're in a position that's a sales position, and
Mm,
good economy equals good opportunities for you personally and for the company you work for. You might still be employed in an economic downturn with substantial income reduction, right? So it's not a loss. You're not a loss on paper, but it's impactful to you and your family and meeting your needs. So that fund can create some cushion for those tough times. Insurance is a big one, right? So we talked about disability, death, um, health, life, and property insurance, all those, and disability insurance all protect against unexpected events, right? So this insurance is part of your inventory, even though it's not an asset per se. It's only an asset if one of these things happens, and then it's a really, really powerful asset if it does. So
right.
making sure that you're protected, and in families where there's one earner and one person staying at home, um, probably both those people need life insurance,
Sure.
because the person staying at home is providing unpaid labor that's highly valuable. And if something happens to that person, then the person who is the financial provider for the family is going to need help, and help in many cases is expensive. So,
Well, you
um,
mentioned earlier about, paying down the high interest rate, debt that you might have too. Talk to me.
yeah, yeah. So, the best way to manage debt is to not take on too much debt in the first place, right? Um, but again, life happens, job loss, income reduction, decisions you shouldn't have made, but hey, you made them and you got to deal with them. So, you know,
Mhm.
aside from avoiding too much debt in the first place, if you have high interest debt and if you have multiple kinds of debt, some high interest, some low interest, um, knocking down that high interest debt is a payback to you personally, right? Because that debt will snowball if you don't aggressively attack it and pay it down. So, you know, that might mean just pay off those debts with the highest interest rate first, or pay off the smallest ones because that helps keep you motivated, right? So, but if I look at, if I've got a mortgage that's a few years old, it's probably a really good rate, right? It's probably around 3%
Mhm.
because a few years back we're getting those. And if I have credit card debt, um, that could be, 15, 20, 30%, that's likely to be the smaller balance of the two. It feels good to pay down my mortgage because it's the biggest balance. But you're not getting a lot of payback to pay down a 3 or even a 5% mortgage compared to a 20 or 30%
Right,
credit card.
right.
So if you are in the situation where you have credit card or other high interest debt, that should be probably your primary short-term goal, right? Eliminate that debt as quickly as possible, because otherwise it will snowball and become even more of a burden than just
Yeah.
dealing with it quickly. One other, risk mitigation tactic that isn't always on people's minds is diversified investing, right? Spread your risk across different types of assets, and acknowledging that this is not the same for each person, right? It's based on your goals, it's based on your age, it's based on your needs or lack thereof from your investment portfolio. But buy different asset classes, use different types of accounts to save in. So that might be your work account, which it could be either a tax deferred account or it could be a Roth account. 529s if you're saving for college, HSAs for anybody in a high deductible insurance plan, which is most people now. Um, that's a powerful savings tool. And then assets that we would call taxable assets, which are really savings and brokerage accounts, because those funds you can access at any time without any sort of withdrawal penalties like you might have from an IRA or another retirement plan.
All right. You've covered a lot here, Joe. So as we come to the end of this episode, why don't you wrap this up for us? So we'll talk about you start by taking inventory and setting priorities and goals, and then where do you go?
Yeah. So you have an inventory, you've set goals. Um, I alluded to this, but this is for those folks who are in a committed relationship. You know, this is an activity with your partner. Goes without saying, but I'll say it
Absolutely.
anyway. This is a team effort. You're a team, and you're a financial team. So this one of you can drive the process, but this is a team process. the easiest thing to do, and it's not easy, but it's for some. But the next step is do one thing actionable today, right? So that might be, hey, I'm going to use Excel for my inventory, and I'm just gonna make a list, right? And show it to your partner and have them add to the list. Um, that's an actionable step, right? You've taken the path down creating an inventory. And if you have an inventory, or if you have a budget already, now's a good time to revisit it, right? Things change. Um, and this is a process, right? It's not a task. There are many tasks in the process, but it's an ongoing process. Um, Ideally you do this once a year, right? I think that's enough for most people. That's probably, if you can do this once a year, that puts you ahead of the curve, believe it or not. So many people like to do the cover your ears and close your eyes approach to finances. So if you are actively taking the time yourself and or your partner, if you have one, to do this every year or so, that puts you in real good standing, and it gets easier, right? Because the more you do it, like everything, the more it's a habit. um, think of it as kind of like, hopefully you're going to the doctor every year. I know not everybody is, but hopefully you are. This is as important to your situation in many ways, because it's going to help you meet your short and long-term goals.
All right. So give me a closing line to bring this all down to the end line.
Yeah. So we've talked about it throughout the conversation, but taking control of your finances is not a one-time task. It's an ongoing process. But if you take the right steps, you can really gain a lot of confidence in your financial future.
Joe, how can people reach you at Foster and Motley if they want to talk more about this?
As always, you can find us online at www.fosterandmotley.com. That's Foster, ANDMOTLEY.com. Or feel free to reach out to us at 1-800-532-2962.
And folks, you can tackle your personal finances with clarity and support from the folks at Foster and Motley. Please be sure to follow this podcast about life and wealth, share with others, and thanks for being with us.